This podcast is part of the Red5 Network. For more Red5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
Welcome to episode 45 of From a Certain Point of View. As you can tell, this isn't Josh's voice leading off the show. Josh is down in Florida. He's visiting Galaxy's Edge. He's having a good time. So, in his place, I reached out to the Discord community, and if you're not in the Discord community, this is a good reason to join the Discord community for stuff like this. And our friend Travis Boyle was the first one to jump on the opportunity to come on the show. So I want to welcome you, Travis. Thank you for hopping on, and thank you for volunteering.
I'm glad to be of service, sir. You know, if I'm going to be the first guinea pig of something, might as well be this, right?
Yeah, right. So, normally this is kind of where we do what we've been up to part, but I want to kind of focus on what you do here. So if you're in the Discord server, you know Travis as Mad Dog, and that is what you use. I mean, you stream on Facebook. That's what your page is, Mad Dog 1885. I'm actually wearing my Mad Dog polo, which you can't see. Mad Dog, not polo. It's a zip up. I don't know why I said polo.
By the way, that's the best.
Yeah, it's most comfortable zip up hoodie I've ever had. So why don't you just tell everyone what you do, what your channel's about, what you stream, and tell us about you.
Yes, as Adam has eloquently put, I do stream on Facebook. Name is Mad Dog 1885. I kind of stick to Destiny. I'm a little bit of a part-timer. About 3 days a week is what I do. Have fun, relax, try to, I like talking to people. So that's why I kind of just started doing streaming. So it was a lot easier for me to be that extrovert, and especially right now with this COVID thing, to be myself. It was just pretty nice. So it was kind of an easy transition to do. So even just talking about anything or whatever the day is brought is always fun,
Yeah, definitely. And
the funny thing is what I do for my job is I work with firearms every day.
Nice.
So that's a little different than what a normal thing I would do.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Video gaming.
Right. So I know you play a good bit of Destiny too, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So kind of that sci-fi-ish Star Wars vibe. Mm-hmm. If anyone out there hasn't played it.
Yes, big time. Kind of a game that I never thought I would get into. When I first saw it coming out, when Bungie just got, essentially the whole breakup between Bungie and Microsoft from the Halo series, I never thought this would be a game I could try and play. And then I blame Tim for all this. So he started playing the Forsaken DLC. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wait a minute, this looks really freaking cool. So I picked it up, and I've been I haven't put it down since. So it's really a really great game, really well designed, really well played, because Bungie doesn't do anything half what. So
right. And you mentioned Tim. Tim is on Facebook. Would be Darkness 429, and that's you can see Travis hanging out there if anyone drops into his daytime streams. Travis hangs out there. I hang out there once in a while. And, that's kind of where we met. And the rest is history, I guess, right?
Yeah, we ended up having friends. Foxman's about an hour and a half from me. And then
I didn't know you guys were that close. That's cool. He was on the show a long time ago. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So he's close, we're both Iowans, and then you and I started talking about, you knew about Star Wars, and then here we go. It's just now an unraveling of everything. Me sitting in front of my TIE Fighter Special Forces poster, Star Wars Legos to my left, that
awesome
Chewbacca's onesie in the closet. It's just it's
Awesome.
became a rabbit hole, and it's absolutely fun.
Oh,
to
yeah,
be able
yeah.
to talk to other Star Wars people and actually learn a lot. I'm kind of a guy who's very much a surface Star Wars fan, but then when I start talking to you and hearing Tim and Kevin talk about their what they do on their podcast, it blows my mind how deep this really goes.
Oh man, yeah. If you have the time and the money, if I'm going to be honest, to really dive into this, you'd have content to last years, and it's and especially if you go back, before Disney stuff, you could be reading this stuff the rest of your life. So it's extensive, and there's a lot to it, and I honestly, I don't consider myself like this, there's way deeper Star Wars fans out there than me. So if you're worried about being service level, I don't consider myself that far below service level either. It's just so much fun, and there's so much in this galaxy to talk about, and there's so much to be interested in for everybody, I think. So yeah, it's a lot of it's so deep, but it's so much fun. And once you meet that type of person that really kind of introduces it to you and invites you in for the conversation, it's hard to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
You become the meme of who said Star Wars, and you just burst through a crowd, and there it is.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, getting back to the episode here, first of all, we have a Twitter poll, and to be perfectly honest, this poll isn't even over yet as we're recording this, but I would say the results, it's pretty much over. There's still 12 hours left. So last week we talked about how to navigate Star Wars social media, and that was our kind of main focus last week. So the poll this week, the question is, what social media platform do you use the most? And 3 options were Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We asked this on Twitter, so maybe that's a little bit of the reason why things came in this way. But Twitter won this poll by a large margin, 89.5% as I'm recording. Like I said, Facebook is 7.9%, and then Instagram way down there at 2.6%. Travis, what do you use the most?
I bounce between the 2 of Twitter and Facebook, but I do have all 3 for my, just for what I do, because I'm a social media kind of person that likes to interact with other people at all times and wants to see what other people are putting out there. So it's really nice to see that I can cover all 3. But Twitter right now is a lot of the one I use just because of all the memes and just the conversation they have on Twitter. That's just all just tongue in cheek and just a lot of fun.
Yeah, Twitter has become my main as well. I mean, years ago it was probably Facebook would have been my answer, but since then it's really become Twitter, for better or worse, I guess.
Right.
So, Twitter is the big winner on this week's poll. Congratulations, Twitter.
One crisp internet 5.5 for you.
All right, so this week's show, this is going to be a little bit of a different show. I already, like we said, Josh is on vacation. So Travis is going to hang out with us for the news, which is coming up right next, and we've got some interesting stuff to talk about. Not a whole lot of news that we want to highlight, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about. After news, we're going to get to review Star Wars number 5, which is the long-awaited, thanks to COVID, continuation of Marvel's most recent volume of Star Wars mainline comics. So we're going to take a look at Star Wars number 5. And then after that, we're going to talk about the sequel trilogy. Josh, through the magic of editing, Josh is going to be joining us for both the Star Wars comic segment and the sequel trilogy segment. We're going to be talking about whether or not the sequel trilogy was mishandled. And interestingly enough, that kind of leads us right into the news. So let's just do it.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
All right. Thursday was a fun day in Star Wars. Social media, you know how we talked last week about all this stuff, and Thursday was one of those days where the conversation was very heated, for good reason too. Not without merit. John Boyega gave an interview in GQ magazine in the UK and talked about a lot of stuff. Talked about before he really hit it big in acting, some interesting stuff that he has had to endure, and then really got into how much work he started doing with Star Wars and all the other franchises he jumped into, and then as John is kind of apt to doing, he kind of let out some frustrations, which were very definitely with merit, for sure with merit. He got into how how his experience in Hollywood as a black man ended up going for him. Some very interesting stuff. If you haven't read this article, I highly encourage you to do that. We're not going to recap the entire article here, but we're going to kind of highlight some stuff. Did you hear about this stuff happening, Travis? Did you read the article?
I kind of glanced through it a little bit. I also did see somebody else highlighted it through another news article as well. And it seemed like he kind of thumbed his nose a little bit at the mouse about how they ran the franchise with him in it. So
for sure,
it seemed a little strange for somebody who, Disney was supporting him through this whole situation of Black Lives Matter and him going out to the protests, which is his absolute right to do so. They're like, hey, go ahead.
Yeah.
You have our support. You have our backing. We got you. And then for him to have this come out in the article, and of course it probably was said out of frustration. So I'll give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. It just seems a little bit like not really the right way to say something that you're, to go about saying something that's an issue, I guess.
John doesn't pull punches. And that's one of the things he talked about in this article, is that he feels that some of his experiences in I guess Star Wars specifically, but also Hollywood in general, have kind of made him that way. It was very straightforward. He I'll give a little bit of a warning here. There's some language in it as well, in the article as a whole. So if language isn't your thing, just be on the lookout. There's a little bit of it. So I guess here's where I'll start with this. He went back to specifically The Force Awakens, and he talked a lot about the marketing of that movie. And if you think back, his character was marketed with, the lightsaber and all that. And, we did get that in The Force Awakens. But the point that I feel that he was making is it was leading the public to believe that he might be, that, maybe Jedi character. And the way he put it was that they marketed him as more important than he ended up being. Okay. Which I can't argue with that.
It's an honest, very fair assessment.
I can't argue with that at all. And, it's weird. The segment is coming later, but Josh and I already talked about this in the sequel trilogy segment that will be coming up. But we can't argue that at all. Finn is starting in The Force Awakens. I felt his arc was going in interesting places, and then it just kind of stopped. And not putting the blame on anybody in particular, but because I don't think that's what it's about. This isn't a Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams thing. And John talks a little bit about JJ and all that. I think he feels pretty comfortable with JJ. That's the vibes I get from him. But that's what happened, and John's words are more or less that Disney, and he says Disney specifically, Disney didn't know what to do with characters like him or Kelly Marie Tran, and then he mentioned Oscar Isaac as well. And then he said that they knew perfectly well what to do with Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley. So for him, this comes down to a matter of race, to put it bluntly. Yep. So my reaction to this is that he absolutely has a point here. What happened to Finn is undeniable, in my opinion, anyway. That character did get wasted. But the flip side of that for me is I don't think that had anything specifically to do with his race or with Keller, or with Kelly's race or Oscar's race. I got to come back to, I think that's a lack of planning. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a lack of planning. I could make a compelling argument for almost any character in that sequel trilogy, including, I would include Luke in that. The characters were misused at times in the sequel trilogy. And this is coming from a guy that I like the sequel trilogy. I love those movies. And I'm coming around on Last Jedi. But I can make a compelling argument for any of those characters, I think. And so I don't think it comes down to a matter of race. However, again, that was his experience, and that was what he lived through. So I think, you take him at his word for that, is how I feel. But I just don't see it specifically having to do with his race.
Agreed.
So, but yeah, any more to say on that, Travis? It's it's a very charged topic, especially now.
It is. It's a very poignant topic. It's a very charged topic because even if you say half a word wrong one way or another, you're labeled, and it's tough.
Like, I don't want to take away from his experience, from what he lived through, and I think to a point it's valid.
Mm-hmm.
I think once there's some separation in time from all the emotions right now, I think we look back on that and say maybe there were some other factors here. Now, the one point I will bring up that I do think contributes to this is there's talk about what happened to him in the poster in like China, where Disney or Lucasfilm, whatever, had edited that poster to give him less space. They took Oscar Isaac out. They removed Maz Kanata, specifically for the poster in China. And, you have to assume that that's because of race, because the culture in China. Mm-hmm. So, you can't really argue that was racially motivated. But what happened to him, to his character from a story point of view, I think in time we're going to realize that it wasn't specifically race, that there were other factors involved.
I think so too. You're dealing with two different directors with JJ starting the first one. You had a second director that was completely different, that seemed to take the film in a complete different direction than
for sure. Mm-hmm.
Force Awakens, and then you got JJ trying to pull it all back together to the way he originally had it, and it kind of had it thought in his head.
And I think you can see that thought in his head. I think if JJ had done all three of these movies, that Finn would have ended up in a different place. I think that. Point. Yeah, I think that the intention for him was to be force sensitive all along, and I think we would have maybe explored that more in two movies with JJ rather than one with Ryan and one with JJ. Because I think in The Rise of Skywalker, that's JJ kind of tying back in what he wanted Finn to be from the start. Yeah, but again, it's that lack of a cohesive vision from the start for the sequels as a whole, and
if you had all three movies kind of written at one point where it had arced everything instead of just bits and pieces, it makes everything seem more seamless, and I think that's what helped out with the original three, and I think the prequels, they had an overall idea. They had everything drawn out already, and then they just put it together. This is the story you need to follow. You can't change it. You can't divert from it, but you need to follow this story. How you get there is how you get there.
Yeah, exactly. And, again, that's something that Josh and I are going to talk about later. Even the original trilogy that had separate writers for each film. Well, Larry Kasdan, I guess, wrote the two. However, they had separate directors for each film as well. George was still that kind of glue that held everything together, that kind of knew where he wanted things to go through the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. He had somebody he was basically
in one way or another. Yeah, right. I don't believe the sequel trilogy had that. And of course the prequels had it. It was all George. I don't think the sequels had that one person that held it all together,
It would be something if Filoni was running the whole thing. Or even Lucas still trying to running point of kind of getting checked on a little bit, but I mean, you don't want him to end up having the prequels again. So I mean, they kind of put him there, but they kind of put him there, but then you have somebody just kind of behind him, like, hey, calm down, we don't need all that CGI. Just take a second here.
Yeah. I think the intention. I don't want to talk about this too much longer because this is really what we're getting into later. But I think the intention was really to get three, and I think Josh mentions this later, to get three different directors and get their interpretations on the saga as a whole. And I don't think the saga was the place to do that. No. But anyway, moving on. I think we're good on that topic, right?
Good on Johnny for stepping up and saying something.
Yeah, 100%. 100%
developing for the rest of after this kind of calms down and everybody can take a collective breath. Yeah,
I'm with you. So, also on Thursday, in the middle of all this, the Mandalorian Season 2, we got a confirmation on what day that's coming. I keep saying Thursday. This actually might have been Wednesday. Now that I look back on this.
It doesn't matter, but I was excited.
But anyway, The Mandalorian Season 2 is coming to Disney Plus on October 30th. We got the confirmation of the date. We got a brand new logo as well, which is kind of a more blue logo than last year's orangish brown. I think we still didn't get a trailer yet as of Friday night. However, we have the date and we have a logo. What do you think of those?
I'm excited to see where they really take this story. They leaving off with the Darksaber coming out.
And Giancarlo Esposito has been just talking up that Darksaber.
He loves that damn thing, and I think we all do too.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see where they really take it. It's going to be very interesting because you've got so many stories that they've kind of touched on, but you haven't had any follow up. I think one of the ones that I remember just vividly was the killing of the bounty hunter when they made that trip. I think wasn't it Tatooine when they made that? Yeah. So you have a bounty hunter that we don't know who that was or what's going on. So hopefully they touch on that and kind of get you a little bit of.
I would love to touch on that. Yeah. I have so many theories about that, and I just want to find out what's going on. Probably all wrong.
Just tell me.
Exactly. So Josh wanted me to add here that he loves the new Mando art with the child on it, which I do too. I thought that was a beautiful touch in that art, where last season the A had the Mandalorian in the middle. Well, now the A has Mando and child.
And then you've got, if you look in the letters, the two letter right at the N and the M, and then part of the A, there's two cities. It looks like two cities. You got a moon on the N and then a little bright light just underneath the moon. And then you got another over on the M, looks like another city. So we'll see if that actually comes to fruition of something that we can actually say, hey, those places or
Right. Yeah. Good point. But yeah, I'm loving that logo, the new colors, and I think it's beautiful.
Agreed. It looks really clean. It needs to be my background on my PC.
Good idea. Maybe I'll have to do that. Mine's still the squadrons stuff. But anyway, we also got some High Republic news. You familiar with High Republic at all, Travis?
I am not.
Okay.
Educate me, good sir.
Cool. So, to get you caught up real quick, last year there was this thing known as Project Luminous, which was kind of revealed at Celebration. And we didn't really know much about Project Luminous except for that it was going to be, some type of multimedia initiative. Okay. So we found out earlier this year, I believe it was in January, maybe February, that Project Luminous was actually called the High Republic, and the High Republic was going to be taking place about 200 years before the events of Phantom Menace, and it would focus on a new set of characters facing a cataclysmic event in the galaxy. So, new Jedi, except for one that we're going to talk about here. New Jedi, new story. This is taking place across novels and comic books for now, and got to think that maybe it might expand into other mediums as well. But for now, novels and comic books. And this week we got some concept art for Yoda, because we know that Yoda is about 900 years old in the original trilogy. So 200 years ago, he'd still be around.
Mm-hmm.
So we got two images of Yoda. One with a darker brown robe with kind of almost some looks like almost like rays of light at the bottom. With his green lightsaber, and he's looking kind of very Revenge of the Sith as he's facing off with Palpatine in that first image. The second image is him with his walking cane and a more gold style robe. A little, the High Republic concept art has all kinds of these like regal looking robes and outfits and gowns and stuff. So this is kind of him in those more regal dressings, and he's just got this tough guy look on his face, kind of looking out the side of his eye. Kind of looking almost Mace Windu-ish. But interesting stuff. We knew that Yoda would be around. We didn't know if he'd make an appearance. I kind of thought he would. But now we know for sure that he is going to be, in some form or fashion, part of these stories. And Josh let me know what he thought about this, and I think I mainly echo what he's saying. He said he's all for Yoda being in the High Republic stories. It only makes sense for him to be there, and it's going to give fans a hook to get into it. But he just doesn't want the focus to be too heavily on Yoda. So I think I'm with him on that. I want the focus to definitely be the new characters, because I think it's time to get some fresh new people into Star Wars, new people to focus on. I kind of always thought that Yoda's role would be almost like an advisor to these new characters, like say they come back to the council for advice, and I think Yoda would kind of be there and ready to give advice as he has in the past. I don't know that I really don't know that we'd see him in action much like we saw in the prequels. But yeah, Yoda is confirmed in the High Republic. Cool. Yeah, very cool. It's definitely cool to see a new era, a new time period working backwards in time for Star Wars. I feel like that Rebellion and Rebellion and Civil War era are really kind of
dead horse
crowded right now. Yeah. So it's nice to go into a fresh new era. But Josh mentioned Yoda being that hook. You still have that familiar character in Yoda to latch onto.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing that you want somebody to kind of draw you in. And then the next thing is like, okay, it starts with him, but then it expands out from there.
Yeah, definitely. So that wraps up the news for this week. Travis, thanks for joining us for the news. And
not a problem. Thank
again,
you for having me.
Again, through the magic of editing, Travis is gonna kind of take a break for a minute. He's gonna go get a glass of water, take 5. And then Josh is gonna
green room, be right back.
Cool. Josh is gonna step in, and we're gonna review Clone Wars 5, and then we're going to do our sequel trilogy talk. So thanks, Travis, and we'll talk to you at the end of the show.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Do you remember when we talked about Star Wars number 4?
No.
It was a long time ago, man.
It's probably in a galaxy far, far away.
That was at least 6 months ago, and then everything happened with COVID, and it just got delayed and everything, and it came out a few weeks ago. We've given some space here. There will be spoilers in this. We're going to talk about the story here. So if you haven't read it and need to read it, want to read it, fast forward. But
this
we're
is your spoiler warning.
Yep.
Yes.
So Star Wars number 5. If you don't remember, we left off with Leia, Lando, and Luke. They're leaving Bespin. Luke was looking for trying to find his lightsaber. He ended up at the bottom of the wind tunnel, whatever that thing is, and chatting with some Ugnaughts, and he had a vision of someone that may have picked up his lightsaber, a hooded female. So we leave them. Leia had been frozen in carbonite in issue 3. She was rescued in 4. So number 4 left off with Luke splitting up from the group. He's going to go trying to track down that vision. Leia and Lando are rejoining the rebellion. So Star Wars number 5 picks up with Vader is searching for Luke. He starts in a cantina because Star Wars. Yeah. Always starts in a cantina. Where this random guy, it just happens to be boasting about being Luke Skywalker. So he's kind of taking up that name. He's claiming he's the best pilot in the galaxy, and basically he's just trying to get smuggling jobs. So he's just lying out of his teeth just to get some paying jobs or something like that. Vader offs him pretty quick, chokes him, tosses him aside. And he does that. He leaves everyone else in the cantina alive. He says he wants this guy to be an example that anyone that carries the Skywalker name will meet death. And then the quote was, "Because Skywalkers die."
Interesting.
That quote spoke to me a bit. And, Vader warns his officers check their leads a little bit better before wasting his time, because now he's concerned that, Luke is farther away because he's wasted time with this nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, the rest of the story picks up with Luke. Luke is arriving at a planet called Cerelia, which I don't think we've heard of before. But if I'm wrong, call us and leave us a voicemail on Anchor.
I've not heard of it.
I
but
have
there
not
might
heard of
be
Cerelia before.
There might be somebody out there who has.
Yeah. But he says that this is the planet that he saw in his Force vision. It matches the vision that he had. So he lands on a. It's like a fishing dock. Think of Perfect Storm in space, I guess. And he just. I guess it's the Force doing its thing because he just happens to land right where that hooded figure would be. Approaches her, asks if she's a Jedi, just flat out, do you happen to be a Jedi? And she, above her, there was this big net full of fish. She cuts the net full of fish loose, drops it on Luke, and then she takes off.
So, Adam, do you think that she was sitting on the dock of the bay?
Maybe she was watching the time roll away. I
think so.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious. It's another great cover by Smith and Myers, by the way. If you're a Shinedown fan.
Yeah. Josh and I were jamming on some Shinedown when we went to see Empire Strikes Back in the theater last week.
For sure.
So this was kind of random, but Luke jumps into a boat. They both take off. So we had if there's ever been another Star Wars boat chase, again, let me know, because it's kind of like Cerelia. Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a Star Wars boat chase.
This is a unique situation.
Yes, it is. Yeah. The hooded female, she jettisons some cargo from her ship. Luke then crashes into that in his boat, so he's in the water. The hooded figure she docks her boat on the beach and she escapes into a cave. Luke, who's with R2 has been flying with him. Luke floats to shore with the help of R2, and they end up in the same cave. This cave, it's almost kind of like a Indiana Jones, like a Raiders of the Lost Ark, because this cave is booby-trapped like at every turn. R2 is almost crushed by a falling boulder, after they step on a stone and trip something on a stone. Luke isn't so lucky. The next time he jumps and falls into a pit, and at the top of the pit there's a grated cover, and the pit fills with water. So it's basically like a drowning trap is what it is. Mm-hmm. But as the pit's filling with water, the hooded figure approaches and stands at the top of the cover for the pit, and they start discussing some stuff. Luke finds out her name is Verla, Verla. She actually tells Luke about the Purge and the Inquisitors, who are all led by Darth Vader. So Luke, up to this point, doesn't seem to be familiar with that story of the Purge and the Inquisitors. So she obviously has been around for a bit, and she knows some of that stuff about Order 66, and all that. And then she senses Luke's reaction to the name Darth Vader, and so she starts to kind of do her little mind trick, or kind of almost like Kylo Ren mind trick, where she's reaching out and she's actually probing into his mind, and she finds out that Luke is Vader's son. Luke tries to plead with her that it's a lie, that he knows it's a lie. So Luke is still not, he's still grasping, he's still grappling with the idea that Vader may or may not be his father. Right. And then she fills the pit with water and leaves. So Luke is underwater, trapped at the end of this issue. Overall, I enjoyed it.
Little cat and mouse game going on here.
Little cat and mouse game, yeah.
You got some. It's kind of a mix of Star Wars and the Goonies, Indiana Jones.
It's a little bit of everything. It's yeah. I've never seen fishing communities like that. Like it was literally, it looks like a northeast, northwest, like fishing community like we're used to here in the US. some interesting stuff. Like I said, some Indiana Jones-esque stuff in there. It's kind of a little bit.
I still want to know how this lightsaber gets to Maz
There's
Kanata.
nothing. Yeah, there's nothing about the lightsaber in this issue.
I was just watching The Force Awakens again.
Yeah.
And Maz is like, "That's a story for another time."
We haven't
What
got
is
to
the
that
other
time yet. Yeah.
Tell me this story.
Yeah. Well, I don't know yet. But I don't want to say like we've gotten away from the lightsaber, but it was not a factor in this issue, so I don't know. I don't know if we come back to it or not. But Verla seems to be the one that might know something about the lightsaber, so we'll see. It was a fun issue. It was a little off the wall sometimes.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite. The opening with Vader was kind of interesting. I wasn't quite sure like how that had a whole lot of impact on what's going on. I felt like that was maybe a little bit unnecessary. I mean, Vader's searching for Luke. That's fine. But it didn't really add much. So I don't know. It was a good issue. Didn't not like it, but it was just kind of okay, I think.
Yeah.
So
I haven't read it, but from your review of it, that sounds like a sound assessment.
Sound assessment it is.
Yes.
I will take that. All right. Well, with that review under our belt for today, our next step is to talk about the sequel trilogy. Let's dive into some mishandling or not. This should be not controversial at all.
Not at all.
No.
I'm sure we'll both completely agree with each other, and it'll go smoothly.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of our fans,
everyone
and everybody
that listens to this is going to be totally on board with everything. Yeah.
No, of course, we're all going to have our opinions about this one, and that is just fine. That is A-okay, because this is from a certain point of view.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Well, today, during our point of view segment of the show, we're going to be talking about the sequel trilogy and whether or not it was mishandled. There may be many people out there that feel it was mishandled, and we're going to talk about what our point of view is on that. But the sequel trilogy, of course, it's in the books. It's done. The films have been completed and released. You can watch them all on Disney Plus now, and all of the mysteries have been revealed. But there are still some things that remain unclear, Adam. We don't know everything that happened behind the scenes. With this decisions that were made and directors that were changed, and whether or not there was a plan for the trilogy, and all those things were kind of unclear. But I'm sure we each have our own opinions about it. So
I don't have any opinions on it.
Okay, so I'll just skip you. I'll just talk the whole time.
Okay.
About mine then.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're gonna talk about whether or not the sequel trilogy was mishandled from a certain point of view. So we're gonna look at three main things today. We're gonna look at kind of just the planning process and how this sequel trilogy came together from the get-go. We're gonna talk about the films themselves, and what maybe their successes and failures were as films, and then kind of as a retrospective looking back, and what will people think years down the road about this trilogy, and has anything changed since these movies have been released for us. So let's first look at how well planned these films were, the planning process or the lack thereof, depending on your point of view. But it all started when Lucasfilm purchased, Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2012. And, it seemed like their goal was to get a film out by 2015, and they decided to continue the Skywalker saga, though it wasn't necessarily called that at the time, but they wanted to go to Episode 7. And The Force Awakens was released in 2015. And then a Skywalker saga film was released every 2 years in December following that. So, Adam, what are your thoughts on the amount of time that they had to work on each film, or to film each movie?
Um, I think it was adequate time. If everything worked according to plan, which we know that it didn't quite work according to plan. You know, I think the idea was mainly just to start work and then basically kind of work almost continually through last year, and if some things didn't happen with like Colin Trevorrow, that type of stuff, I think that 2-year gap would have been okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, if you look at Star Wars trilogies,
It's been
the way George Lucas did them, I mean, there was a 3-year gap between
Right.
each film, so they had a little bit more time in between those to work some things out. With the sequel trilogy, we had 2 years in between each film, and I agree with you. Like you said, if everything had gone according to plan, I think that would have been fine. And I think for The Force Awakens, that was the case. For The Last Jedi,
Right,
even, I know
right.
Ryan Johnson had started writing the film and working on it, while The Force Awakens was being worked
You
on.
see, and that's almost that's like almost the thing, It was so like, we looked at thanking the maker for all of George's stuff already. So a lot of the writing and a lot of that stuff didn't really start until after, that, So what I'm trying to say is, Empire Strikes Back didn't really start writing consistently until after New Hope was out,
Right.
And the same goes for
Right.
Return of the Jedi. So if you overlap that a little bit, then I think you're still getting enough time.
Right.
Like we saw, things didn't quite work as planned. So
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Colin Trevorrow, and I think one issue is I imagine J.J. Abrams coming back for Episode 9 had to feel maybe even a little bit rushed to get that movie out on time. So I think that was the one exception because of what happened there with the directors, where it might have been just a little bit rushed. What about the casting for these films, Adam, and the utilization of the legacy characters? So bringing back Mark, Carey, Harrison, but then also casting John Boyega and Oscar Isaac, Daisy Ridley. What are your thoughts?
I thought the casting was great. The utilization of the legacy characters is a bit tricky. And I can get into what I preferred. I would have preferred Luke to be in Episode 9 in the flesh. And if he's going to sacrifice himself, then to do that in that movie.
Yep. I'm with you on that.
I would have preferred that. Some of that is easier in hindsight because we know what happened to Carrie Fisher. She passed, and unfortunately, and that really changed the game a lot about what they could do with an Episode 9. So that aspect is in there too. That was another one of those unforeseen things, I think. But those are just kind of what I would have done. I would have, So the utilization of the legacy characters, I think, was okay. I don't know that I loved it, but I think it was okay.
My take on that, the legacy characters, and then we can move on to the newer cast. But I felt they nailed Han Solo in The Force Awakens. I think that was the best thing they pulled off as far as legacy characters go in this trilogy. I love how involved in the story and the action Han was, and I mean, you could see his sacrifice at the end coming from probably a few miles away, maybe less. But I just think that he fit so well into that film and kind of being almost the mentor to the new characters, and he had really come full circle because in the beginning, with A New Hope, he really didn't believe in the Force. He thought it was a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and then you hear him saying in The Force Awakens, it's true, all of it. So his character's come a long way. He's really involved in the action. I think he's, for the most part, that Han we knew and loved, and I thought that was great. with
Yeah.
Carrie.
I will say that I loved that part of Han. I don't
Mhm.
love the estranged part of Han, with him and Leia being separate.
Yeah,
I didn't love
agree.
that, and a lot of
Mhm.
that's probably because of my prior EU knowledge, and
Sure.
how that stayed together, stayed married, that type of stuff.
hmm
So I didn't love that aspect of Han, and how he was kind of a deadbeat dad type thing.
Yeah,
Or
I get that.
that's too harsh. Deadbeat's too harsh. I
Mhm.
mean, he loved Ben. And it's a different story. I get that, and I like aspects of the story, but that's the only part of Han that I didn't love.
And
So
I think when it comes to that, Adam, and I was thinking about this the other night when I was watching The Force Awakens, we have to think about the fact that this stuff with Luke and this stuff with Han and Leia separating, none of this stuff happened until Ben became Kylo Ren.
yeah,
And
right.
that event really messed with these characters, I think. As Han and Leia being the parents, it kind of sent them into a tailspin. Well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go back to what I'm best at, I guess. And Luke secluding himself on the island. I think before that, they were probably those characters that you would have seen in the EU or would have imagined them being.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I
a
mean?
fair point. I think
Mhm.
way back in episode 2, I think we talked about this with Luke. How about it's really only like a 7-year portion of their history,
Right, right.
So it's
You
not
have to
it's
put
not
that
the
in.
majority of the time. It's not like
Mhm.
after Last Jedi or that's not after the Return of the Jedi that all this stuff happened. So it's not 30
Right.
years. So
Right.
that was one of the things I mentioned back in the early days of the podcast that kind of
hmm
helped me a little bit with Luke.
Yeah.
The same is true with Han and Leia.
Sure. I feel like Leia's strongest film, was The Last Jedi, actually. Because Carrie's performance in that movie, I think, is her best in this
She's
particular
a
trilogy.
little rusty
Um,
in Force Awakens
yeah.
for sure,
And then they could only do what they could do with her in Rise of
which
Skywalker.
was still
Though
really impressive.
I loved the Leia
Yeah.
stuff in Rise of Skywalker. I
Yeah.
think they pulled it off so dang well,
Which is
and it
weird because
really-
that's Force Awakens stuff, and we're just saying,
Yeah.
how that she was a little rusty in that movie, but then the stuff that they
Right.
reused was really good.
Right. And then of course with Luke, we only get a brief moment with him in The Force Awakens, but I love that cliffhanger scene at the end. But I love his performance in The Last Jedi. I think Ryan
Yeah,
Johnson really brings out the best performances in these actors. And I just love Luke being in so much of that movie, even though in the beginning he isn't where we want his character to be. He throughout the course of the movie he changes and everything. We've talked about that many times, but Rise of Skywalker, Luke Force Ghost stuff just didn't quite do it for me. I don't know if it was how he looked. He was a little too blue for me. I talked about that before, and it was almost just like kind of okay. Fans didn't like the Luke in The Last Jedi, so we're just gonna make him, this version in the Rise of Skywalker. So that's how I kind of felt about it. But overall, I really think they did a okay to good job with the legacy characters. What about the new ones?
I mean, I think the new cast is wonderful. I have
I agree.
no problems with the casting. I think that where characters ended up made sense for the story that they wanted to tell, for the most part. So I don't really have any problems with the new cast or where they ended up.
I think the only gripe I have is with John Boyega's character with Finn, because in The Force Awakens he is so great. He is utilized to perfection in that movie. It's just youth. I thought that character was really going to go places, and in The Last Jedi, I think his character got a little bit shortchanged. He didn't have the most compelling story. And we've talked about the whole the Canto Bite stuff and everything. And then Rise of Skywalker, I liked his role in that and everything. I still feel he was like just kind of support a support character to Rey and everything. With The Force Awakens, I just felt like his character was going to be a bit more than it turned out to be.
Yeah, I can see that. I think my main problem with him in Last Jedi is that it's more. It seems like he's going back to where he was in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, there's still that indecision there.
Yeah, there's still some rehashing of stuff there, but I mean, he ends more resolved, and so then I think in The Rise of Skywalker we just get, Finn as he is,
Yeah,
that indecision is gone, and it's more decisive. I'm disappointed that we didn't get to explore more of Finn and Rey together, because it felt like there was more there in The Force Awakens, and then they were separated for most of Last Jedi, and then what we got in Rise of Skywalker was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I felt like there was more there to that relationship, and it was kind of forgotten almost at some level.
Yeah. I'm with you there, and it would be a mistake for us not to mention like Adam Driver, being cast as Ben Solo and Kylo Ren. I think he is the most dynamic character in this sequel trilogy, the most compelling character. Would you agree with that?
I would put him up there with I know the connotation around Rey, how things were just too easy for her. I don't agree with that. I think that I think she was very dynamic. I think Daisy Ridley was wonderful.
Oh yeah, I love her.
So, with the exception of Rey, for me, then I would agree with Donald Driver as Kylo Ren.
Yes. So, So overall, I think great casting. In the use of the legacy characters was at least okay. There's some argument to be made there, but and I think some of these issues we have maybe with leads into this kind of last question in this first part is, what about the decision to use 3 different directors for this trilogy instead of having like one throughout, or at least a consistent writer for all 3? What do you think?
I don't mind I don't mind that. I don't mind having 3 different directors, because you have to look at the original trilogy that did the same. I think the thing, kind of like you mentioned, having a consistent writer or at least a roadmap at the beginning would have helped, because the original trilogy had George to kind of hold all those things together, the one guy with a vision, and then when you look at the writers, you bring on guys like Larry Kasdan to help with that type of stuff. So George kind of held that together, and I don't know who would have done that for the sequel trilogy, because the idea was for...
Who is that?
I think JJ had this, I think JJ had that idea at the beginning. I think he kind of had an idea where this was all going to go, which is probably why he was kind of their guy to bring back on for 9. I think he had that idea, but I don't think that was set in stone.
I also think if we consider the 2-year gap between films, had JJ stayed on the entire time, that might have been tough to accomplish all that work in that amount of time as well.
Oh, for him doing the directing, like one director.
Let's say JJ did all the writing and directing on all 3.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes I wish that would have happened just to have that consistency. Even though I love what Rian Johnson did, I think you can see some things don't quite flow as well as they could have. I feel like the Last Jedi is definitely a continuation of The Force Awakens, picks up right where it left off, even though it feels like a different film than The Force Awakens does. But then I feel like that gap between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, it almost feels like 2 very different films. It almost feels like it's a whole new thing now that we're setting up with Rise of Skywalker.
I almost feel that way with all 3 movies, to be honest with you. I know that Last Jedi picks up right after The Force Awakens. Right. But still, for me, it feels pretty different. it definitely I can tell that
Yeah.
that there's two different visions there of where this is going to end.
Right.
And then, like you said, it definitely, even though I think The Rise of Skywalker does, I don't think it abandons everything that happened in The Last Jedi. I do think that it comes back around, but still, again, you can definitely feel that there's a different vision there.
Mm-hmm.
So, going back to the idea of like of a writer, or just having, maybe not even a writer, maybe just having one person that kind of knew where this was going to end up. Kind of like George, didn't really do a lot of the writing, but he was kind of that guy that knew how this was going to end.
Yep.
I don't think that was there, and you can see that for sure because, with Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates script is a pretty different ending than what we ended up getting.
Sure.
So, you can definitely see that plan was different for different directors. So that, I think at least having that roadmap, that outline at the beginning would have helped.
I think what Kathleen Kennedy's approach was almost like, okay, let's get these 3 great directors and we'll trust them to pick up the story and continue it. Versus, okay, let's find the person who is going to have the whole structure of this trilogy kind of figured out for the most part. And you fill in the details and things change, of course, as you're filming and everything. So I feel like that was the approach. Let's find the hot directors. Let's find and have them.
And I don't want to put this on Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, I don't think that's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if there is someone, I don't know, from like a story group or something that would have just been like the point, like this story consultant or something like that,
I just think you need a George Lucas, you need a Kevin Feige, you need someone that's kind of that knows
Dave Filoni, something like that, someone that
Dave
was
Filoni. Someone that knows it through and through, that's steering the ship. They don't write and direct everything, but like you said, they're kind of that.
Yeah, I mean, like hypothetically, I mean, if they had someone like Dave Filoni that they said, hey, can you like, almost like executive produce these type of thing, and not even like doing a lot of the directing, but just kind of like, can you like outline this, plan this out, and as we're writing, we'll be consulting with you about what's going to be happening here. I think that would have helped a ton.
Absolutely, I am in agreement. Any other thoughts on just like how all this was, the planning process and everything of these films?
No, just something that I think that we can learn, that they can learn and pick up going forward.
Okay. Well, let's look at the films themselves, the finished product. What are your overall thoughts of the sequel trilogy?
I think it's a good trilogy. I still think it's a good trilogy. I think and this sentiment's already out there, but I think in 10 or 15 years, these criticisms, even though they'll still be out there and still be, valid to a point, I don't think you're going to hear them as much. I think it's going to age well. I really do. I already see people saying, hey, I'm rewatching The Rise of Skywalker and I don't hate it anymore.
Right.
I think as time goes on and we get further removed and, our emotions aren't as wrapped up into what happened, I think it's going to be fine. So I like the sequel trilogy as a whole.
I think a lot of this is about expectations, Adam. And we are, when it comes to things like Star Wars, we build up this headcanon for many years. And especially, with the EU, like you said earlier, you have these expectations about what's going to happen in this trilogy. And even between movies, you're theorizing and you're thinking of all these things, the way you want the story to go, or who you want to be Rey's parents, or who Snoke is, any of those things. And then when you see the movie and it doesn't go the way you thought it would, then there's going to be that initial reaction. But like you said, when you give it some time, when you step away from your expectations and just kind of go back and enjoy them for what they are, I think they become more appreciated.
Yeah.
As far as my overall thoughts of the sequel trilogy, I also think it's a great trilogy. Of course, there's some places here and there that feel like They don't flow as well as they could have because of, how everything was mapped out, and the director changes and everything. But I'm always excited to go back and watch this trilogy. Like, even just recently, I'm like, I'm excited to watch these movies again because, you know, the main thing for me is rewatchability, and I think these films are really rewatchable. So, and we've kind of touched on this next question already, but how well do the films flow together in your opinion? And maybe we can just talk briefly about this because I think we've already hit this point.
Yeah, a little rocky. But I still think that where it ends makes sense to where it began, and I think it still tells a good story throughout the whole thing.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's much more to say about that.
That's all we got to say about that.
That's all we got to say. In what ways do you think this trilogy succeeds or falters?
I think it tells. I think Ben and Rey's story, I think, are told very well, even across all three directors. I think Ben's redemption from start to finish makes sense. So I think that is the main success there.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that Rey's story is a success. I know that there's questions about her being nobody versus a Palpatine and all that other stuff. I still think that her story, from beginning to end, finding out who she is and where she belongs, and then her getting to choose where she belongs, after hearing multiple truths, I think that works. I think that for me that fits. I think that works. Really the faltering, I have to go back to just the rockiness of all, transitioning between directors. But, for me, that's probably just the main falter, other than some minor character gripes that I've already talked about. So,
sure. For me, I'd say the trilogy really succeeds in getting me excited about Star Wars again, bringing Star Wars back and making it feel like Star Wars. Of course, my appreciation for the prequels has grown, but back in 2015, I was like, okay, I want this to feel more like the original trilogy than the prequels. I want it to be practical effects, all those things feel a little more gritty, a little more real. And I think it does those things. I think it really got me excited about Star Wars again and just the feeling of the original trilogy. I also think it really succeeds with the new characters that it introduces and caring about those characters. And it's hard to follow up characters like Han and Leia and Luke and how great the big three are. But with Rey and Finn and Poe and even with Ben / Kylo Ren, I really grew to appreciate and love those characters. And I think it tells a great story. Where it falters for me is, things we've already talked about, some of the disconnect. But I think for me, the moment that really threw me for a loop was when I was watching The Last Jedi for the first time, and Kylo Ren killed Snoke, because I was like, how do you do that? I was like, this isn't right. Like, this is your big bad. This is, your villain, and you're killing him in the middle part of this trilogy.
It really sets up that last chapter for a tough way to handle that.
So it's like, what does JJ do? Now, JJ probably set up this villain as the main villain of the trilogy, and I'm guessing. And then Ryan kills him off, and then you're JJ like, what can I do except bring the Emperor back? And to me, bringing the Emperor back felt a little, it just didn't work. I liked it, but it didn't. The execution was tough for me, and it felt like it was just like, okay, this is all we can do is bring the Emperor back at this point. So that's where it faltered for me, was just with that decision to eliminate Snoke that quickly. And
I agree with that. I do think that JJ's plan was to have Palpatine back.
Yeah.
I feel, for me, that Episode 9 is really JJ's 8 and 9 smushed together in one movie,
Right.
you know? So I think it, I don't think it would have felt that way if JJ had this trilogy the whole way through. I think that
Right.
we would have gotten some different hints in episode 8 about this about that type of thing. And I think it would have fit together better. I'll give you another
it just
thing.
Feels like, oh, the Emperor came out of nowhere. He survived. We don't know how. He's back. He's building a new empire. It just kind of came out of nowhere for me.
I'll give you another thing that I thought faltered, and it's one of my least favorite characters across the entire saga, is the whole thing with DJ, and not just the Canto Bite stuff.
Yeah, I am not a fan of the DJ character.
I really don't like, you know, we talked about how this is a story of light and dark where the good guys and the bad guys are clearly defined. And I don't like how that was, to me, that felt like an attempt to blur those lines.
Yeah.
And wasn't a fan of that one bit. I mean,
and you have Benicio del Toro, and that's how you use
great
him.
Actor. And
he could have been a great secondary villain, you know.
Yeah.
Who knows? He could have been a Knight of Ren or something like that, you know. And
yeah, I just that whole blurring the lines about, you know, where we're buying our ships from. I just for me it didn't feel right. Still doesn't feel right.
So yeah, I do think that if again, I would have been curious to see JJ do the entire trilogy, even though, like I said before, I love The Last Jedi. I love what Ryan did. I'd be curious to see what that would have looked like. But anyway, let's look at the kind of the aftermath of this trilogy. Has your appreciation for any of these three films increased or decreased over the last few years?
Force Awakens has stayed the same. I love The Force Awakens. It's probably my favorite of all three.
Yeah.
And the other two have, I would say, slightly increased. I mean, because I didn't like Last Jedi at all when it came out, and I have moved on from that. I don't hate it anymore. It's never going to be my favorite, but it's also not at the bottom of my list. So it's definitely over time has increased for me. And again, a slight increase for the Rise of Skywalker, just because I liked it when I saw it, and I think I've enjoyed it a bit more on each viewing since. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much with you. The Force Awakens, the first time I saw it, I loved it. The last time I watched it the other night, I loved it. It's a nearly perfect Star Wars film in my opinion, and just brought back Star Wars in such a great way. The Last Jedi, I absolutely hated it the first time I saw it, just because I hated the decisions that were made, like Snoke being killed, Rey apparently being nobody, you know, those types of things. But then, like the second time I saw it, I loved it, and then I kept my appreciation for it kept growing. And then the Rise of Skywalker, the first time I just felt kind of like meh about it. I didn't know how I felt about it. But then again, I've appreciated it the more I've seen it. So, what about years down the road? You mentioned this earlier.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier.
How do you think people will view this trilogy years down the road? Maybe grow a greater appreciation for it?
I mean, I think we're already seeing, as we get a little bit farther away from the release of these movies, that people are slightly more accepting of them. And I think the same thing will happen with these three movies as happened with the prequels, where, you know, we get down to the future, and especially the people that grew up with these movies are going to have more of a voice to talk about them, and I think that you're going to see a lot more appreciation for these three down the road.
Absolutely, I'm with you on that. And finally, in your opinion, was the sequel trilogy mishandled? Why or why not?
I'm going to qualify this. I'm going to say yes in certain parts. However, it still works for me as a whole. I think that there was things, you know, it's important to remember that this is the first time since 1983 that a major Star Wars movie, we didn't know how it was going to end, right? The sequels, we knew how those would end. That was written in stone. We knew how that stuff would work out. This was the first kind of open-ended story that we could tell, and I think that
really
Lucasfilm learned some things about how to do that going forward. So were parts of it mishandled? Yeah, because I think, like I said, they just kind of didn't know how to go into new territory with that yet. I think they understand now. I think they know better now, and I think going forward, I don't think we'll have problems like these again.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
I think it was
hopefully.
Hopefully. I agree with you. I think parts of it were mishandled just with, kind of the lack of an overall plan. And just the things that came up with the director changes and everything we've already talked about. But overall, I do love this trilogy. I'm always excited to go back and watch it. And, it feels like Star Wars. It just could flow a little bit better and have a little more consistency and everything.
Yeah, I'm with you there for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was fun breaking down the sequel trilogy with you and looking at whether it was mishandled or not.
Yeah, I've been waiting to have this discussion for a while. This is kind of one of my show topics that I've been waiting to pull out of the bag.
Been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's good. It's a lot of fun.
Yes.
All right, you ready to wrap up this episode?
Yes, sir.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you for joining us for episode 45 of From a Certain Point of View. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Remember to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. We're on so many. And this week, we can announce that we are on iHeartRadio now. So that's yet another place you can find us. We're taking over the internet in some form. Check out the website from a certain point of view.com. There you'll find blog articles. You can find links to every podcast app you can find us on. You can send us questions, show topics, anything you want. You can find a way to contact us on the website. Our socials are Twitter @CertainPOVPod. Facebook is From a Certain Point of View. The Discord server link is in the show notes and on the website. And again, I'm going to plug the Discord server. Make sure you join it because we do some fun things there. Not just, we have a pretty active memes channel, so there's all kinds of funny stuff there. But then, it's a great place to just connect with the community. And every once in a while, I'll send out little things like this. If we need someone to fill in, I usually go to Discord. So check it out. It's free, and you can find those links, like I said, on the website in the show notes. Email is certainpovpod@gmail.com. And we are hosted by Anchor.fm, where you can send us a 60-second voicemail. If you have any input on anything we talked about this week, any questions, anything that you might have heard last week or any week before, if you're going back through episodes and you hear something from 10 weeks ago you want to talk about, send us a voicemail. We'd love to play it. Check out the Red5 Network. There are just a ton of great podcasts on the Red5 Network. It's not just Star Wars. There's podcasts for any type of, geeky entertainment thing you want, you can find on the Red5 Network. So go to red5network.com to find all of the shows there. You can find me on Twitter is the main place for me, @thegauze85. Travis, let everyone know, plug your stuff. Where can they find you?
You can find me at fb.gg/maddog1885. My Twitter handle is maddog_1885. Those are the two big places that I'm usually at. I'm live 2 times a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Weekends are kind of a toss in the air just because it's the weekend. Don't know what's going on.
Got stuff to do. Yeah,
that's right. When you're married and own a house, you got to do
That's
stuff.
also true. Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to see everybody come and hanging out with me. And Adam does pop in from time to time. Join his Discord. I'm in there dropping memes.
Yes, you are. Mostly TikTok videos, but we'll work on that.
You know what? They're dad jokes and they're fantastic. And I can't help it. It's when it's funny, it's funny.
I love it.
But yeah, I by the way, I tagged you in a Mando trailer, by the way.
I see that notification. Okay, I'll check that out later.
But yeah, that's where you get easiest way to find me.
All right.
So come on through.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining and for kind of last minute just jumping on and saying, yeah, you know, I'll do news with you, Adam. I appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me be here, man.
No, it's not a letting thing. I'm glad you volunteered. So thanks for joining us. This is your litmus test, Travis, right now. So we'll see how often you listen to the end of the show, because we end this in a certain fashion, and we'll see if you get it. You ready?
Yeah.
Everything we've told you guys today is true.
From a certain point of view.
Nailed it.